His wedding, daughter's funeral. Sean's white moonlight had an incurable disease. Her last wish before passing away was to hold a grand wedding with him. He not only wanted to marry his white moonlight but also asked me to be her bridesmaid and our daughter to be the flower girl. I refused to be the bridesmaid, and he said we'd get divorced then. On the eve of the wedding, our daughter went missing. Sean was busy accompanying his white moonlight to try on wedding dresses and buy rings. I was desperate and helpless and turned to him for help, but when he looked at me, his eyes were cold and sarcastic. "Claire, I told you that if you don't want to attend Yuki's wedding, we'll get divorced. There's no need to joke about our daughter." But when we found our daughter again, she was covered in blood and had no breath left. Sean was accompanying Yuki to try on wedding dresses and buy diamond rings in the mall. Yuki took a look at the price of the wedding dress and said coquettishly, "Forget it, Sean. This one is too expensive. I've spent so much of your money. She'll be angry." Sean lowered his eyes and smiled. "How could that be? The money is mine, and I can give it to whoever I want." The wedding dress was so beautiful that I was lost in admiration. There was no wedding, no ring, and no wedding dress between Sean and me. I didn't originally want to come here and torture myself, but our daughter had been kidnapped. I had been looking for her all morning but couldn't find her location. I had no choice but to come to Sean. When he saw me, the gentle smile on Sean's face disappeared instantly. "What are you doing here?" My voice trembled. I was so scared when I thought of our daughter's disappearance. "Sean, our daughter has been kidnapped." He frowned tightly and the next second he scolded me angrily. "Claire, if you don't want to attend my wedding with Yuki, just say so. There's no need to joke about our daughter's safety." Every word I said took all the strength out of me. "Sean, I'm not joking. Our daughter has been kidnapped." Sean's expression was full of displeasure, as if he was dissatisfied that I had interrupted him in Yuki's dress selection and ruined their alone time. In his eyes, our daughter's disappearance was a lie I made up just to stop him from having the wedding with Yuki, but my daughter really had gone missing. When I received the video of our daughter being kidnapped, the little girl was tied to a board with a black rag stuffed in her mouth. My heart ached terribly. Thinking about the possible abuse our daughter might have suffered made me tremble all over with discomfort. I showed the video to Sean. Taking my phone, Sean casually glanced at it and snorted coldly. "Claire, do you think I'll believe you? Yuki's life is almost running out. Our daughter is still so young. I'll have plenty of time to accompany her in the future. Can you and your daughter stop being so childish and stop competing with a sick person?" Sean took Yuki's hand and was about to leave. I immediately grabbed him and tears kept pouring out of my eyes. "Sean, I'm not lying to you." He suddenly pushed me away, his face gloomy. "Claire, I told you that if you don't want to attend Yuki's wedding, we'll get divorced. There's no need to joke about our daughter." Yuki, who had an incurable disease, came to Sean crying. She said her only wish was to have a grand wedding witnessed by her parents. Sean agreed. Yuki also specifically asked me to be her bridesmaid and my daughter to be her flower girl. Sean even agreed to such a shameless request. I refused to be Yuki's bridesmaid, and Sean threatened me. "Fine. If you don't be the bridesmaid, we'll get divorced, and I'll get the custody of our daughter." Sean's family was extremely powerful and had a perfect legal team behind them. I couldn't compete with Sean's family on my own, so Sean firmly believed that I had directed and acted in the drama of our daughter's kidnapping just to avoid being Yuki's bridesmaid. Watching him leave with Yuki, I was completely desperate. 6 years ago, Yuki and Sean were a perfect couple on campus. They were always glued together and very affectionate. After graduation, Sean's family opposed their relationship. Without hesitation, Yuki took Sean's family's money and went abroad to find a new lover and started a relationship. Sean was depressed for a long time after Yuki left. I was a medical student. Sean's grandmother had a sudden heart attack while dancing square dance outdoors. Coincidentally, that square was the only way I passed by every day after work. I immediately gave Sean's grandmother cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Fortunately, with the timely rescue, Sean's grandmother was saved. After saving Sean's grandmother's life, she was very warm and caring towards me. Hearing that I was an orphan, she became even more enthusiastic. She took me back to Sean's family. When I saw Sean, my breath was taken away. Sean turned out to be Sean's grandmother's grandson. Under Sean's grandmother's strong urging, Sean impatiently got along with me. Sean's grandmother's last wish on her deathbed was to see Sean get married and have children. On our wedding night, Sean was fierce towards me, his eyes bloodshot. "Are you satisfied now? How long have you been plotting to marry into Sean's family and covet Sean's family's property? Since college, right?" His tone was indifferent, and the way he looked at me was as if he was looking at something extremely disgusting. But I didn't know that Sean's grandmother's grandson was him, and I had never plotted for Sean's family's assets. I agreed to marry Sean because I had liked him since college. Holding back my tears, I felt his fierce strength and the tearing pain under me. After getting pregnant, Sean never touched me again, as if he had completed his task. I cooked antler soup for him. Looking at the soup, he sneered and directly poured the bowl of soup over my head. Isn't it enough that I gave you a child? Don't be greedy and think that I'll touch you again. Don't be shameless. The hot soup burned a big blood blister on my skin. I stood there at a loss, looking at him and wanting to explain, but couldn't say a word. He had completely misunderstood me. He didn't come on the day I gave birth. If it hadn't been for Sean's grandmother's last breath to call him, he probably wouldn't have come to see me in his whole life. He didn't even want to hold our daughter. He just took a look from a distance. Okay, my task is completed. I'm leaving. After our daughter was born, Sean's grandmother had a great-granddaughter and survived for a few more years. Sean became even more unscrupulous in hating me, thinking that I took advantage of the old lady's sympathy to marry into Sean's family. He took women who looked like Yuki to various entertainment venues and even asked our daughter to call them mom just to annoy me. When Sean was drunk, I helped him, and he shouted, "Yuki." When he opened his eyes and saw my face clearly, he immediately pushed me away. Get lost. Don't touch me. Claire, I found out that you liked me back in college. No, you liked Sean's family's money. I didn't expect you to be so clever that you could drive Yuki away and win over my grandmother's heart. He didn't like me, nor did he like our daughter. A call from an unknown number came. Our daughter's childish voice was calling for me, "Mom, save me," along with miserable crying. It brought my thoughts back. Every word of our daughter's was like a knife cutting into my heart. The day after tomorrow was Sean and Yuki's wedding. We hadn't divorced yet, but he was blatantly having a wedding with someone else. While Sean was busy arranging Yuki's wedding, I was searching everywhere for the specific location where our daughter had been kidnapped. The kidnappers threatened me not to call the police or they would kill my daughter. I did as the kidnappers asked, but on the day before Sean's wedding, the kidnappers sent me a photo of our daughter covered in blood. At the first sight of the photo, I completely broke down. My daughter was dead. I screamed desperately on the phone and asked the kidnappers where my daughter was. Following the location given by the kidnappers, I found my daughter's body with her head and body separated in an abandoned factory. Seeing my daughter's body covered with scars, I felt cold all over and my legs went weak. I knelt on the ground in a hurry and opened my phone to send messages. After sending the messages, I saw on my WeChat moments that Yuki had posted a photo of herself wearing a wedding dress with a man in a suit beside her. That man was none other than my husband. Looking at this photo, I felt it was so harsh and ironic. Yuki had abandoned Sean for money and left. Now that she was terminally ill and had no money left, she came back to him. If it hadn't been for Sean's grandmother still being alive, Sean would have divorced me long ago and married Yuki openly. When I married Sean, I had fantasized about wedding dresses, honeymoons, and wedding scenes. Every time I tried on wedding dresses and took wedding photos, I was alone. On the day of our wedding, he simply left me alone and went abroad. He recorded a video that was played on the big screen at the wedding. I, Sean, will never like Claire in my life. When I saw the video, I blushed with shame, clenched my fists, and kept my head down. I walked through the wedding process alone. The people in the audience were all laughing quietly. I managed to endure and finish this self-entertaining wedding by myself. After that, I also became the gossip topic after dinner in City A, the well-known abandoned wife of Sean's family. He didn't accompany me once during my prenatal checkups or even when I gave birth, but he never missed any of Yuki's re-examinations. I held my daughter's body numbly in frozen place, crying until my voice was hoarse. I searched around here but couldn't find the other part of my daughter's body. The kidnappers seemed to have installed surveillance here. When they saw me looking for my daughter's head, they called me, "I have your daughter's head in my hand. Be good. I'll return it to you if you do as I say." The phone kept ringing. I numbly picked it up and realized that a whole night had passed. Today was Sean and Yuki's wedding. Sean questioned me, "Why haven't you come yet? If you don't attend, others will think Yuki is a mistress. You must bring our daughter to attend so that Yuki's innocence won't be ruined." My mouth was dry and I told him hysterically, "Sean, my daughter is dead." He seemed unable to hear what I said and continued on his own, "Hurry up and come. Do you hear me? I warn you. If you don't attend today, we'll get divorced. I'll get the custody of our daughter, and you won't get a penny from Sean's family." Hearing his threat, I sneered. Did he really think I didn't dare to get divorced? Now that my daughter was dead, he and Sean's family meant nothing to me. If it hadn't been for fighting for the custody of my daughter and staying by her side, I would have been willing to get divorced long ago. "Sean, I agree to get divorced." After saying that, I hung up the phone. Maybe he would think again about what the scheming woman Claire was planning. But it didn't matter what he thought anymore. Since I hadn't found my daughter's head yet, I simply held a funeral for her. I was the only one at her funeral. Sean held a wedding of the century for Yuki, and there was even an online live broadcast because Yuki was a popular top actress. I watched on the screen as Sean gently lifted Yuki's white veil and then looked down at our daughter's incomplete body lying in the coffin. I couldn't help crying again. In the pitch-dark night, the fireworks were blooming brightly in the sky. Such a good day was the anniversary of my daughter's death. I sent him a message to remind him I agreed to get divorced. 0 For I had been so busy these days looking for clues about our daughter's kidnapping that I almost forgot to go back to Sean's family. Sean's grandmother was so angry that she was hospitalized when she learned that Sean was holding a wedding of the century for Yuki. When Sean's family called me, Sean's grandmother was already on a ventilator and was dying. The old lady took my hand and asked slowly, "Where's the child? Where's my great-granddaughter?" When our daughter was mentioned, I couldn't stop crying. The old lady was on the verge of death. I couldn't let her leave with regrets and self-blame. Sean treated me indifferently, but Sean's grandmother had been very kind to me and our daughter. "Grandma, Ivy is in kindergarten. I'll bring her to see you next time." Sean yanked my hand tightly gripping my arm, his eyes gloomy. "Claire, bring the child back. Grandma has been so kind to you. Do you still want to be willful at a time like this?" I shook off his hand and he suddenly pushed me hard against the wall. "Sean, you're the one who should feel guilty. If it hadn't been for you insisting on marrying Yuki, Grandma wouldn't have been so angry that she was hospitalized. You have no right to blame me." A sarcastic smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. He grabbed my neck with his big hand. "Bring the child here right now. Don't force me to look for her." I bit his arm hard. He let go in pain. "My daughter is dead." After saying that, I turned around and left to apply for my daughter's death certificate and then cancel her household registration. I was packing up my daughter's belongings at home. After packing up, the door was kicked open forcefully. Sean walked towards me with red eyes and hurried steps. He was full of hostility all over and roared at me, raising his hand and slapping me hard on the face. "Claire, are you fucking doing this on purpose? Just because I held a wedding for Yuki, you want to take revenge on me like this? Do you have any conscience? Grandma is dead." Hearing the news of Grandma's death, I was stunned for a moment. She still couldn't make it through tonight in the end. But it was better than knowing that her granddaughter had been kidnapped, abused, and died. For me, I lost 2 relatives in one day. I threw the death certificate of my daughter that I had just got at his face hard. When he saw the death certificate, he was also stunned for a moment. Soon, he regained his cold expression and looked at me. "Don't think I don't know what tricks you're playing. Can a death certificate be easily faked?" Claire's assistant, lock her in the basement. The basement was where he kept his Tibetan mastiffs. Those Tibetan mastiffs were fierce and terrifying. Spending a night with them would cost me my life. Moreover, I hadn't found out the cause of my daughter's death or her head yet. I couldn't die. I cried and hugged his thigh. "I don't want to." The basement was pitch dark. Besides the Tibetan mastiffs, there were also several snakes. The Tibetan mastiffs were in the next room, and the snakes were in the same room as me. Those fierce dogs stared at me, licking their tongues. The snakes wriggled on me. I didn't dare to move, take a deep breath, or even close my eyes. I must survive and seek justice for my daughter. When I was let out the next day, there was an extra wound on my body. I wasn't sure whether it was bitten by a snake or I got it by accident. However, I heard that these snakes raised by Sean were non-venomous, so I didn't care about these wounds. I just wanted to find the missing part of my daughter's body. Seeing the wound on my body, Sean ordered his assistant to take me to get treated in a tough tone. I avoided his physical contact, and his hand froze in midair. The assistant was also stunned for a moment. This was probably the first time I refused his concern. Because I liked him and he cared about me, I used to be like a puppy wagging its tail vigorously when given a little bit of kindness. But I didn't like him anymore. I limped away. "No need. If you have time, let's go get divorced." Sean sneered. "Do you think Sean's family is a supermarket that you can come and go as you please? You killed Grandma, and you'll have to stay in Sean's family to atone for your sins for the rest of your life. Lock her up and make her kneel for 3 days at Grandma's funeral." At Sean's grandmother's funeral, I knelt for 3 whole days and nights. I knelt until my legs were so weak that I almost fainted. Sean sneered sarcastically. "Don't try to pretend to faint. You're not allowed to leave until you've knelt for 3 days and 3 nights. If you dare to take a break, 1 more day will be added." In order to go out to look for my daughter's remains earlier, I didn't dare to close my eyes for a moment. I knelt not to atone for my sins but to bid farewell to the kindness Grandma Sean had shown me in the past and to remind myself of such a heart-wrenching punishment. Falling in love with Sean was the biggest punishment. 05 After the funeral, Yuki suddenly fell ill. Sean immediately dropped everything and rushed to the hospital to take care of her. I cleared out all my things and my daughter's belongings from Sean's house. The anonymous number called me. "If you want your daughter's head, come and get it. Don't call the police or I'll throw it into the sea." Upon receiving this call, I immediately drove there. My parents died in a car accident at night. I was the only survivor sitting in the back seat. So when I grew up, although I got a driver's license, I never dared to drive. The only birthday present Sean gave me was a car. For my daughter's sake, I overcame all my fears. The moment I saw the kidnappers, my legs gave way and I knelt down. "Please, give me my daughter's remains back. I won't call the police. I just want my daughter's body to be complete. The kidnapper gave a lewd smile and touched my face. All right, transfer 1 million yuan to my card. I heard you're Sean's daughter-in-law. The other kidnappers laughed and said, what daughter-in-law? She's more like an abandoned wife. They all burst out laughing. I endured the humiliation as they trampled on me and tremblingly took out my phone to call Sean. Could you give me 1 million yuan? He was silent for a while. Sure enough, you'll stop at nothing for Sean's family's money. How much do you think your skills in bed are worth? Even sleeping with me thousands of times wouldn't be enough for you to pay me back. A teardrop struggled hard and finally fell. You've all heard it. He won't give me the money. The kidnappers pinched my mouth and stuffed pills into it forcefully. I spat them out and they stuffed them in again. My mind was in a daze. All I knew was that they threw me on the bed and took several sets of photos. When I woke up, my daughter's remains were beside me. Holding the other half of my daughter's incomplete body, I burst into tears. I remembered the looks of all the kidnappers last night and secretly took photos of them. After reporting to the police station, I immediately sent my daughter's remains to the hospital for an autopsy. My daughter's remains were on the stretcher, and everyone covered their noses and mouths and backed away in disgust. Sean happened to be in the hospital accompanying Yuki for a re-examination. He covered Yuki's eyes. It's disgusting. Don't look. I clenched my fists. Is it disgusting, Sean? That's your daughter. I looked at Sean, and his eyes were full of coldness. I stared at him with disgust. The doctor who performed the autopsy on my daughter was Sean's cousin. When Eric saw me, he was shocked. Sister-in-law. Sitting outside the autopsy room, I felt as if all my strength had been drained. Eric came out and took my hand. Go and get your wounds dressed first. You're covered in injuries. If he hadn't mentioned it, I would have almost forgotten about the wounds on my body. There were the ones bitten by snakes when Sean locked me in the basement, the ones I cut myself with a knife because I was afraid of falling asleep while kneeling in the morning hall for 3 days and 3 nights, and the ones from being abused by the kidnappers last night. The kidnappers poured hot water on my hands, and my hands were scalded red and lost their sensation. I couldn't imagine how much inhumane abuse my daughter had suffered before she died. Whenever I thought about the torture my daughter had endured, it felt like knives cutting into my heart one by one. I want to stay with my daughter. I'm afraid she'll be scared. Seeing that he couldn't pull me away, Eric could only sigh. I passed out until the doctor reported the autopsy results. When I woke up again, I was on the hospital bed. Sean's expression was gloomy, and he threw a stack of photos on the bed. How did you hook up with another man and are willing to get divorced? Since you can't get Sean's family's assets from me, are you planning to shift your target to Eric? Eric rushed in. Sean. What the hell are you talking about? Do you know how hard these days have been for her? Sean sneered with narrowed eyes. Hard? I think she's been having a great time flirting with different men. I looked at those photos, which were taken by the kidnappers. Sean, let me know when you're free. I'm willing to get divorced from you. His eyes became even colder. Divorce? You're dreaming. After the divorce, I won't let our daughter see you, and I won't give you any of Sean's family's property. He had said these words countless times. Now that my daughter was dead, the custody didn't matter to me anymore, and I had never thought about Sean's family's property. Give me my daughter back now. I'll give you 10 million yuan, not just 1 million. As long as you don't divorce me. I looked at him expressionlessly. Even if you give me 100 million yuan, I'm determined to divorce you. Sean pointed at Eric. How much Eric can give you, I can too. Suddenly, Eric punched Sean in the face. Sean, you're fucking crazy. Your own daughter is dead, yet you're still with that woman of ill repute. Do you know that the day your daughter died was exactly the day you held the wedding with Yuki? Hearing Eric's words, Sean paused for a moment and then suddenly laughed. Even you are helping her to deceive me. You're really something. You can even bribe an upright doctor like Eric. It must have taken you a lot of effort, right? For a man's sake, you don't even care about your own daughter's life. I didn't expect that besides bribing my grandmother, you can even bribe my cousin. You're really capable. The phone rang. Hearing Yuki's voice, Sean left anxiously. Looking at his back, I felt it was so familiar. This back that had left me behind again and again was all too familiar. My daughter's autopsy report came out just as I was discharged from the hospital. Looking at the autopsy report, it clearly recorded the abuse my daughter had suffered before she died. I still remembered her last words to me were, "Mom, save me. Mom, I'm going to die. I love you." Sean was supporting Yuki and passed by me. If I remembered correctly, he had never missed any of Yuki's regular re-examination days or surgery days. The day of Yuki's first surgery was my daughter's birthday. In order to accompany Yuki for the surgery, Sean left our mother and daughter on the way. I begged him to send us back first, and he shouted, "Which is more important, a birthday or a life? Is our daughter's birthday less important than someone's life? She's not going to die just because she misses this birthday or won't be able to celebrate it next year." Get out of the car. What Sean said last year came true. My daughter really couldn't celebrate her birthday this year. Tomorrow was my daughter's birthday. Now all she could have was her death anniversary. The next day, I was preparing to take my daughter's body to be cremated. Sean settled Yuki down early in the morning and sent her home. Then he blocked my way. Where's my daughter? I won't allow my daughter to be with someone like you. What right does he have to mention our daughter? My daughter's body was on the hospital bed, and her head had just been sewn together today. I lifted the white cloth. Sean, can you see clearly now? My daughter is dead. She lay there quietly, never to breathe, speak, or smile again. Sean didn't like our mother and daughter. This time, he should be satisfied and could completely get rid of me. The moment he saw our daughter, he froze. The air around seemed to stand still. All that could be heard were heavy breathing sounds and slightly trembling sobs. When Eric opened the door, he was about to say something but then slowed down and walked over slowly. Sean's eyes instantly turned red. He stood rooted to the spot. His voice was trembling. This isn't true, right? The veins on Eric's forehead bulged. Sean, I used to call you brother. Do you know that Yayan suffered inhumane torture before she died? The kidnappers separated her head from her body, and there were hundreds of scars on her body. The day of the grand wedding you held for Yuki was the day Yayan died. Your wife and daughter were suffering, yet what were you doing? And grandma was also driven away by you, yet you still blamed Claire. There was a scar on my daughter's face. In the video sent by the kidnappers, my daughter covered her face with her hand, blinked her eyes, and looked at the camera asking the kidnappers, please don't hit my face. Mom will be worried if she sees it. But the kidnappers were heartless. They slashed a knife across my daughter's lovely face. I cried and pointed at each scar on my daughter's body and told Sean how they came about. Sean's face and lips turned pale, and his legs went weak, and he knelt directly on the ground. He gently stroked the scar on his daughter's face. Suddenly, a strong arm hugged me. Stop it, stop it. I'm wrong. I'm sorry that I didn't protect you well. I pushed his fingers away. In this life, the thing I regret the most is marrying you. Sean hugged our daughter's body and cried desperately, Yayan, look at daddy. Look at daddy. He slapped himself crazily. I deserve to die. Based on the clues I provided, the police found more clues and details about the killers. They used technology to access the surveillance videos installed by the kidnappers when they kidnapped my daughter. The videos clearly recorded all of their crimes. The videos recorded by the surveillance were torture for me. Every time I watched them, I felt suffocated. Sean watched the surveillance videos over and over again, with a pained look in his eyes and his fists unconsciously clenched. I made a statement to the police and told them extremely calmly about what had happened when I retrieved my daughter's head. Sean asked me in disbelief, those photos were all taken by them. Where did they hurt you? Tell me. I ignored him and continued to tell the police what had happened to me. After hearing it, Sean broke down and hugged me. I'm sorry. I didn't protect you well and let you risk your life alone. I broke free from his embrace. There's nothing to say. It'll be fine if we just get divorced. It's really not safe to be with you. Sean looked haggard, looking as humble as a pitiful puppy wagging its tail. Please don't leave me, okay? I'll give you all my money. Don't you understand? I liked you before, not your money. I don't like you anymore. He choked up. I know. I was wrong before. I misunderstood you. I was so mean. I also know that you asked for that 1 million yuan to redeem our daughter's missing remains, but I insulted you like that. You can hit me or scold me, but please don't ignore me, okay? I ignored him again. After finishing the statement, I stood outside in a daze. The sun outside was bright. It seemed that I hadn't seen such a sky for a long time. Before, the sky had always been gloomy. Yuki was standing outside, smiling happily and waving at Sean with a report in her hand. She ran towards Sean cheerfully. Sean, I've got good news for you. We can be together now. My disease is cured. Sean immediately pushed her away. Don't touch me. My wife will be unhappy. Let go. My wife doesn't like you, and I don't like you either. Yuki reluctantly pulled him. Have you forgotten? You promised to marry me. Get lost. Don't touch me. Why should I marry you when I already have a wife? I sneered, glanced at him, and walked away. Sean immediately chased after me. Claire, don't be angry. I have nothing to do with her anymore. I won't contact her again. Please don't be angry with me, okay? Before, his face always looked good no matter how I looked at it. Now it just made me feel sick no matter how I looked at it. His physical contact and his gentle and doting behavior were what I had wanted the most a few years ago. Now that I had them, I felt disgusted instead. Having close contact with him made me want to vomit. I couldn't help covering my stomach and retching. Sean's face showed a trace of worry. What's wrong? Are you sick? I took a step back to avoid him. Don't touch me. Being close to you makes me want to vomit. A car stopped in front of me. It was Eric. Without hesitation, I got into his car. Before catching the real killers who killed my daughter, I won't see Sean again except for getting divorced. These days, he had been trying hard to find me. He knocked on the door of my new house and waited outside for 3 days and 3 nights, but I never opened the door until the knocking drove me crazy. Sean, except for getting divorced, I won't see you. Being with you is the thing I regret the most in my life. Just seeing you makes me want to throw up all the food I've eaten in 3 days. Perhaps what I said was too harsh and hurt his self-esteem, so he never harassed me again. Yuki was a popular actress. Her wedding with Sean was witnessed by millions of netizens. Many people flooded into my comment section to abuse me and photoshopped my daughter's posthumous photos. What made me saddest was that my daughter was still being slandered even after she died. Someone dug out my marriage certificate with Sean and the wedding where he didn't show up. A wedding with only the bride but no groom. Yuki's fans called me an abandoned wife. They said that if it hadn't been for me interfering, Yuki would have married Sean long ago. But it was Yuki who left on her own initiative back then. I didn't get together with Sean until a year later. Even the Weibo records of my secret crush on Sean back then were dug out. Yuki's fans called me crazy and delusional, saying that I still couldn't forget Sean even though he was in a relationship with Yuki. I had been using this account to record things before they got together. I had long forgotten the account password, but it could still be dug out. Overnight, all those abusive comments disappeared. Probably Sean had intervened. Yuki also came to me on her own initiative, looking like the legitimate wife. Get divorced. Sean doesn't like you. Without you, I would have married him long ago. I nodded. All right. You can notify him to prepare the documents now and we'll go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get divorced. Sean walked over slowly, with a look of anger on his face. Yuki. Even without her, I wouldn't marry you. Yuki's eyes were filled with tears after being scolded, but you've already held a wedding with me. Everyone knew about that grand wedding. I had been called an abandoned wife for so many years. After her wedding, people's impression of me as an abandoned wife became even deeper. Sean's eyes were gloomy. If you hadn't lied to me about having an incurable disease, I would never have had a wedding with you in my life. Get out. Get out of here right now. Don't force me to use violence. For the first time, Yuki was put in a difficult position in front of him and left with red eyes. Sean looked at me, his voice full of bitterness. Let's get divorced. I've read your Weibo. It turns out that you liked me so hard, but I didn't know it. And I always misunderstood that you were using all kinds of tricks to get close to my grandmother for the sake of money and the power of the Sean family. I remembered when I found out that Sean's grandmother was the old lady I had saved. I excitedly posted on Weibo. Sean's grandmother is actually his biological grandmother. I'm so happy. This must be God's favor for my kindness. It's just that I didn't expect that my kindness wasn't a blessing but that difficulties were yet to come. I didn't like him anymore after giving birth to our daughter and I stopped updating that account. I smiled, an ugly smile. Sean, if I had known it would be like this today, I would never have agreed to go to the Sean family at the request of your grandmother. I wouldn't have liked you either. Sean was flustered. I'm sorry. For ruining your secret love for so many years. After the divorce, I felt that I had finally come back to life. The kidnappers were caught by Sean. He made the kidnappers suffer all the torments that my daughter and I had endured. Watching those kidnappers crying out in pain, I'm sorry. Let us go. I'm wrong. Under the severe torture, the kidnappers confessed that the mastermind behind the plot was Yuki. Hearing Yuki's name, Sean kept repeating it, and his eyes became colder and colder. Tell everything you know in court. Otherwise, I'll make sure you won't live to see tomorrow without even going to court. He roared, do you hear me? The kidnappers quickly nodded. In court, the kidnappers confessed all their actions and named Yuki as the person behind it. Yuki couldn't accept that she hadn't married into the Sean family. She only knew that the Sean family was wealthy but didn't expect them to be this rich. After going abroad and learning that Sean had gotten married, she regretted it. Knowing that I had Sean's child, she planned how to kill my child and how to marry Sean. So she lied to Sean that she had an incurable disease to make him feel guilty and make him marry her. Now she had achieved her goal. I really wanted her to go to hell with Sean. Yuki was sentenced to death. After it was over, she looked at me unwillingly. Sean stared at her viciously. How shocking the news was that the popular actress was going to prison. How glorious her wedding was back then, and how miserable she was today. What's more, there were people throwing eggs and even urine at her. Holding the judgment document, I took a deep breath and walked out of the court. Finally, the sky was bright. My daughter could rest in peace. Eric accompanied me out of the court. He offered to give me a ride, and I was also very grateful for his help during this period. Yuki didn't have a good life in prison before her execution. Sean specifically ordered people to take good care of her. Knowing that she had tortured and killed a child, the people in the prison bullied her even more recklessly. Before the execution, she lost 20 pounds and looked sallow and emaciated. Watching my daughter's remains being buried, I let out a sigh of relief. In the past 6 months, I hadn't had a good night's sleep for a long time. Whenever I closed my eyes, there were bloody scenes and the scenes of the kidnappers smiling at me and then getting away and couldn't be caught. The day my daughter was buried was also the last time I saw Sean. Sean caught up with me from behind, Ching. I'll call you like this for the last time. Wait for me. I stood there looking at him. 10 years ago, even if he walked towards me with a cold face, I would still be overjoyed. 10 years later, even if he smiled his head off, I wouldn't be moved. This might be the last time we meet. I know that you won't be willing to see me on your own initiative in the future. Wish you happiness. These are the property transfer agreements that I've already prepared. I don't know exactly when I fell in love with you. I only know that I might have liked you for a long time. I was cowardly and didn't dare to admit it. Since I was a child, only my grandmother loved me. I didn't dare to fall in love with a woman who I thought only coveted my money, so I could only be mean to you. But when I found out that you had liked me for so long, my heart ached so much. It's me who's sorry to you and our daughter. I don't deserve to have you. He stuffed the agreement into my hand and then left. Later, after paying respects at the graves of Sean's grandmother and our daughter, Sean turned himself in. He had tortured those kidnappers by improper means and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Before going in, he transferred all his assets to my name. I still remembered that when I just married him, he said to me, by marrying into the Sean family, you want money and power. But by marrying me, you won't get a penny. You've miscalculated. Unexpectedly, for years later, he took the initiative to give these to me. But I didn't need them anymore.